Hey folks, tonight we're easing into a quiet little rabbit hole. The kind with no urgency, no wild drama, and certainly no unexpected plot twists. Just us, tucked in under the dim hum of lamplight, settling into a curious question. Why do stories work on us? Really? Why does hearing about a woolly mammoth hunt or a lonely robot on Mars light up our minds in ways a grocery list just doesn't? Imagine the flicker of firelight against a stone wall, shadows dancing, a group of early humans huddled close, bellies full, hopefully, and a silence falls. Someone begins to speak, their hands move, their voice rises and falls, and around that circle, eyes widen. Even without written words, without formal language, a story is unfolding, and it matters. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy to be here. And hey, if you're up for it, tell us your location and local time in the comments. We love seeing where in the world you're drifting off from. Now, dim the lights, maybe open a window for that soft wind hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The magical science of storytelling didn't start in laboratories or lecture halls. It began on dirt floors, under open skies, long before anyone knew the word neurotransmitter. Early storytelling wasn't entertainment, it was survival. Don't drink from that stream, one tale warned. There's a spirit that steals your voice. Translation: the water was bad. Avoid it or risk diarrhea and possibly death. But as you might guess, evil spirit was more memorable than unsanitary bacteria. Even back then, we wrapped information in emotion, and this emotional packaging, it stuck. Like clay around a stone core, the feeling made the fact easier to hold onto. Over time, these stories shaped values, fears, rituals. They passed along tool-making tips, animal behavior patterns, and a surprisingly detailed sense of what not to do when picking berries. One false move, and you'd be the tragic main character of next season's fireside content. It's easy to romanticize those nights, isn't it? But they were likely noisy, smoky, and slightly smelly. Still, something very real was happening. Studies of indigenous storytelling today reveal a similar rhythm, narratives passed along not just for fun, but as living instruction manuals. The tale of a great hunt might teach patience. A trickster god's mischief might teach humility. That oral tradition wasn't accidental. It was structured, rhythmic, and even had characters with arcs. Long before books, humans knew intuitively, we need stories. There's something intimate about sharing a tale. It's an act of attention, both given and received. Think of lullabies. Why sing instead of reciting nutritional advice before bed? Because rhythm and narrative soothe. The moment a child hears the first lines of a bedtime story, their brain begins to soften, to trust, to imagine. That ancient instinct that we are safe because someone is telling the tale still runs deep in us. It's also why ASMR storytelling, like this very video, feels oddly comforting. Your conscious mind might tune out, but your brain, ever the old soul, remembers this setup. Ah, it says. Someone's speaking gently. The fire must be lit. We're not alone. Now let's drift slightly forward in time. The earliest cave paintings, like those in Chauvet or Lascaux, weren't just random scribbles. They had narrative, a sequence of bison charging, a handprint near a wounded deer, a suggestion of motion, of cause and effect. That's storytelling. Visual, yes, but connected to memory and meaning. One can almost hear the soft murmurs behind those images. That was the hunt where Tharn nearly lost his foot. You remember? And everyone nods. Not because they were there, but because now, through story, they are. As language developed, so did our stories. They grew richer, weirder, more philosophical. Mythologies sprouted across every region of the globe, from Egyptian underworld odysseys to Polynesian sea gods with absurdly long names. These myths weren't just bedtime distractions. They were science's strange older cousin, explaining the inexplicable in metaphor and moonlight. And oddly, That hasn't changed. Today, we still construct elaborate stories when we're unsure of something. The stock market is angry. The storm wants to punish us. We know better, and yet we talk in story because it's how our brains file the world. Without narrative, facts are just bricks in a messy pile. With narrative, now we've built a cozy little cottage with a kitchen, 2 cats, and a squeaky floorboard near the back door. You see, storytelling activates multiple areas in the brain at once: auditory, sensory, emotional, even motor. Hearing about someone running through a forest lights up the same region as actually running through one. It's like your brain throws on its hiking boots and goes, "Okay, I'm in." This may also explain why your heart beats faster during certain movies, or why that commercial about a sad puppy ruins your afternoon. Story isn't passive, it's full brain theatre. And yes, scientists still argue whether our affinity for storytelling is a byproduct of language, or something deeper. Some suggest it's an evolutionary trick. Those who told better stories got more mates and shared more survival info. Others think it's a social glue, keeping tribes together with shared myths and morals. Either way, it worked. Our species thrived not by being the strongest, but by being the best at sharing what we knew, in detail, with flair, preferably with a funny sidekick. Before you drift off completely, which is sort of the goal, let's circle back to something gentle, the warmth of stories told aloud. Maybe it was a grandparent's voice, or a teacher reading under flickering classroom lights. Maybe it's right now. That sense of presence, someone giving their time to speak a story into your ears, is almost medicinal. You don't need to remember every word. Just float along. There's something magical about that, don't you think? In the flickering lantern glow of ancient campfires, stories weren't just told, they were performed. Think gesturing hands, dramatic pauses, maybe a theatrical grunt or two. It wasn't about prestige or applause. It was about making something stick. And it turns out that performance wasn't just flair for flair's sake. It was neuroscience, long before we had that word. Because storytelling, unlike lists or bullet points, ironically, engages your whole brain. Visual cortex, check. Emotional centers, firing. Auditory processing, fully tuned. And oddly, even the parts of your brain that control movement light up. If I tell you a tale about climbing a crumbling cliff, palms sweating, fingers slipping, you might feel your hands twitch slightly. Not because you want to scale anything tonight, but because your brain's doing a kind of shadow rehearsal. It's called neural coupling. Essentially, your brain tries to mirror the storyteller's experience. This is why we cry at fictional losses, cheer for characters we know aren't real, and flinch when someone almost drops their phone in a movie. Storytelling puts our minds in sync, like dancers following the same rhythm in different rooms. Now take this into the world of education, where one might expect cold facts and tidy charts. But good teachers, really good ones, wrap knowledge in narrative. The story of a brilliant but stubborn scientist, the tale of a failed experiment that changed the world, the day the apple dropped on Newton's head, whether it really happened or not. We don't remember what year the law of gravity was published. We remember the apple. Always the apple. That's the strange power of a good image nested inside a narrative. It latches on, holds fast. Ever wonder why your brain retains embarrassing memories so vividly, but forgets where you left your charger 5 minutes ago? Emotional stakes, context. A narrative, even a humiliating one, is simply more memorable. This is where storytelling merges with biology, especially in how we process emotion and memory. The amygdala, your trusty little almond-shaped emotion center, plays a starring role here. When a story stirs feelings, fear, joy, suspense, the amygdala flags it as important. "Hey, hippocampus," it says, nudging the memory maker part of your brain. "File this one somewhere special." That's why people remember where they were during big historical moments, or why the sad part of a novel clings longer than the chapter title. You might say our brains are wired more for narrative importance than narrative accuracy. And that can be both wonderful and frustrating. Case in point, You can perfectly remember the tale of King Midas turning everything into gold, but forget the entire contents of your last Zoom meeting. Unless, of course, your coworker accidentally turned herself into a cat filter again. That story sticks. Scientists still argue whether this memory preference is a survival mechanism or a delightful quirk. Maybe our ancestors who remembered vivid cautionary tales, e.g., don't eat glowing mushrooms or you'll see dancing bears forever, simply lived longer than the ones who needed empirical proof. Today, we call it emotional salience. Back then, it was just called staying alive. Interestingly, this extends beyond words. Music, too, carries narrative. A lullaby tells a story, even if there are no lyrics. A sad cello progression or an eerie chime can trigger an entire scene in your mind. That's why movie scores matter, and why a horror scene with cheerful jazz is suddenly unsettling in a very specific way. Let's slip now into a quieter, softer corner of this topic, the bedtime story. It's a sacred ritual in many households, across cultures, across centuries. The act of being read to before sleep is deeply soothing, and not just for kids. Adults, too, find a peculiar peace in this. It's not because the story itself is groundbreaking. Honestly, most bedtime stories are structurally identical. A beginning, a gentle challenge, a soft resolution. But in that rhythm, our brains find safety, predictability, comfort. And predictability, when you're trying to fall asleep, is a feature, not a bug. It's also about being accompanied. When someone tells you a story, even gently through a screen, you're no longer alone with your thoughts. There's another voice, softer, slower, keeping watch, guiding your imagination down safe, quiet paths. It's not unlike the old role of the village elder, passing along wisdom with a wink and a yawn. And what about stories that don't quite resolve? Ever notice how some of the oldest myths or the dreamier fairy tales just end? No moral, no twist, just a soft, and then she turned into a tree. And that's it. You're left blinking in the stillness, slightly baffled, but also oddly soothed. That open-ended quality actually helps lull the brain into a dreamlike state. The story trails off, and your own dreams pick up the thread. There's science behind that too. When we listen to a slow-paced, low-stakes narrative, our brainwaves begin to slow down. Alpha waves, those lovely pre-sleep signals, rise. Cortisol, the stress hormone, takes a back seat. We breathe slower. Muscles unclench. If the story's gentle enough, our minds begin to wander, just slightly, drifting between listening and dreaming. It's like a mental hammock, swaying between two trees. Even the sound of a storyteller's voice can be hypnotic. The way certain syllables stretch, the little pauses that let you fill in the blank, the rhythm that rocks you, not like a roller coaster, but like a boat tied loosely at shore. That's what we aim for here. Not a thrill ride, just a float. So here you are now, surrounded by soft light and softer words, riding on the oldest form of connection humans have ever known. No screens, no charts, just story. And while our ancestors used it to warn each other about saber-toothed tigers, we've evolved it into bedtime YouTube videos whispered across continents. Storytelling, still magical, still necessary, just with fewer tigers. Stories are more than words drifting through the air. They're biochemical invitations to feel, remember, and connect. Remember that shadow dance on cave walls? That wasn't just culture, it was chemistry. When you hear a tale that clicks, your brain lights up in ways that even your dreams envy. And yes, I'm going to whisper this part, because science can be sultry too. Let's start with dopamine, the tiny molecule we've all, secretly, chased watching cliffhanger TV shows at midnight. Dopamine is the reward chemical, the one that whispers, just one more episode. In storytelling, every tease and tension point, that moment just before you learn whether the princess wakes or the spaceship explodes, releases a burst of dopamine. It's like a gentle tap on your shoulder. Pay attention, your brain says. Something good is coming. And because dopamine boosts focus and memory, you're far more likely to glue yourself to the narrative. The crackling fire in section 1, that flipping apple from Newton's legend. or the slow drip of information that weaves through each paragraph tonight. Next, there's oxytocin, often called the love hormone or social glue. Oxytocin isn't just for new parents cooing at babies or folks snuggling with puppies. No, our brains pour it out when we empathize with characters. Think back to that stuffed animal on the pillow in Section 2's story. You felt your heart softening, didn't you? That warmth came from oxytocin forging a bond between you and the moment. Even if you're listening through headphones in your bedroom, your brain believes it's in the same circle as the storyteller, ready to pass the blanket or catch that imaginary tea mug. Scientists still argue whether this bonding effect evolved to keep tribes cohesive or to bolster pair bonding. Either way, it's our built-in trust amplifier. Finally, endorphins, the gentle analgesic of our minds. Endorphins make us laugh, relax tension, and, bonus, they can even dull pain. When a storyteller slips in a light joke, like picturing someone hugging a glowing mushroom to cure glowing bear hallucinations, your brain rewards that humor with an endorphin sprinkle. You exhale, you smile, your shoulders drop a notch. It's why even sleepy narratives benefit from a well-placed quip. By the way, if you ever feel embarrassed in the dark, just pretend you're the cautionary star of your own viral beginner's guide to midnight fridge raids. Together, these three, dopamine, oxytocin, endorphins, form what feels like a bespoke cocktail of calm, curiosity, and connection. I like to call it the magical storyteller's mix. It's subtle, but it's there, working behind the scenes to keep your eyelids from drooping too fast, to keep your mind both engaged and serene. Imagine a simple narrative. A mother turtle dragging her barnacle-laden shell across a moonlit beach to lay eggs. The suspense of her journey sparks dopamine. The tender image of her vulnerable flippers stirs oxytocin. A playful aside about her wobble-turned strut releases endorphins. All in under 2 minutes, your brain is buzzing with a gentle biochemical symphony. No wonder you remember that turtle better than the third bullet point on last week's grocery list. Even corporate presentations can harness this. Picture your next pitch. Instead of a slide full of percentages, start with the founder's first midnight oil-fueled breakthrough. The click of a keyboard under a flickering lamp. Code lines emerging like hidden constellations. A suspenseful pause. But nothing worked, until that one odd data set glowed like a lighthouse on a stormy night. Boom, dopamine. Then share the founder's moment of doubt, the kind glance from a colleague that sparked resilience, oxytocin blooms. Finally, lighten with a self-deprecating note about eating instant noodles for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Endorphins gently nudge the room into a relaxed focus. Notice how that mirrors our sections 1 and 2. We began with flickering firelight, dopamine lure, moved through primal rhythm and empathy, oxytocin glow, then embraced a playful riff on bedtime rituals, endorphin giggle. That pattern isn't coincidence, it's functional storytelling in action, the very toolkit you're learning to wield tonight. You might wonder, can these effects backfire? Indeed. Overloading on suspense without relief can spike cortisol instead, the villainous counterpart of our angel's cocktail. Too many plot twists, and your brain cries foul. Hey, what's happening? That's the devil's cocktail creeping in. Stress, irritability, and face-palming at the sheer absurdity of your bedtime routine. Balance is key. And if you think adding jokes at 11 p.m. is silly, let's not forget that laughter slow cooks endorphins better than any daytime comedy special. A gentle snort in the dark, a suppressed chuckle, each is a nudge toward relaxation. This is why the occasional light-hearted asides or whispered oddities, like, "Remember the glowing mushrooms," are more than cute. They're neuroscience wearing a bedtime sweater. Now let's address the curious listener perched half asleep. Are these chemicals really part of your nightly drift? Yes, yes, and yes. Functional storytelling isn't wizardry, it's friendly chemistry. When you tune into a story with intention, eyes soft, breath slower, your body leans into that slow, steady beat of narrative. Dopamine says, "Stay with me." Oxytocin says, "You belong here." And endorphins whisper, "Relax." We're wired this way. For millennia, stories were the glue that held communities together, teaching, comforting, and warning in equal parts. We learned to fear predators and trust friends by watching a flicker of hands and voices under the night sky. Tonight, we're simply continuing that ritual. No cave roof required. So, as you sink further into your pillow, remember, every word you hear is a small biochemical nudge toward memory, empathy, and ease. That's the magical science of storytelling, crafted just for you to guide you gently into rest. And if you dream of neurons dancing in fluorescent lab coats, well, consider it a bedtime bonus. Falling in love with a story is eerily similar to falling in love with a person, minus the awkward first date sweat, but with all the same biochemical fireworks. Remember that time you couldn't stop thinking about the protagonist's dilemma in section 3? That was your brain doing a slow-motion swoon, like watching someone tie their shoelaces in perfect balance. In both cases, you're enthralled, attentive, and more than a little bit under the spell of your own hormones. First, let's rewind to that giddy moment when you encounter the spark. Picture yourself, cozy under blankets, listening to a story about two star-crossed gardeners who whisper sweet nothings to their rival rose bushes. You lean in because you have to know, will those petals ever entwine? That initial attraction ignites a rush of dopamine, sending your focus laser sharp. Suddenly, everything else fades. You forget the email you meant to send, the toast you burned this morning, even that embarrassing time you waved at someone who was actually waving at the person behind you. Your brain says, this is it, obsessively important. But it's not just dopamine. As you root for those roses, oxytocin seeps in, forging a tender connection between your own heart and the fictional world. Oxytocin whispers, this matters, you care. You find yourself comforting imaginary characters, cheering for their courage, maybe even shedding a silent tear when the plot thickens. Academics still debate whether oxytocin's primary evolutionary role was for mother-infant bonding or for fortifying social networks. Either way, it's at the heart of our narrative romance. Then, there's the slow burn of endorphins, those cozy little painkillers that make laughter feel like a warm blanket. A well-placed quip, perhaps imagining the head gardener slipping in a puddle of compost, breaks any tension and lets you exhale with a quiet chuckle. That momentary relief from suspense is a microdose of joy, smoothing out the edges of high drama and making the entire experience pleasurable. These three chemical acts together are why you might wake up the next morning humming a line from last night's story. That rosebush had it coming, you might murmur to yourself while brushing your teeth. It isn't just a catchy phrase, it's your brain's synapses remodeling themselves overnight, cementing memory through emotional imprinting. Now think back to a time you fell in love with someone, perhaps a partner, maybe a crush, or even a celebrity who played the guitar upside down and wore glitter. Don't deny it. That flutter in your chest, the sweaty-palmed excitement, the irrational fantasies of bumping into them at the grocery store. It's practically the romantic plot of your own life, and you spent hours replaying every word they said, every smile they flashed. That is storytelling in your head, a private narrative you revisit for comfort and hope. In truth, our brains don't differentiate much between real-life romance and narrative romance. Mirror neurons, involved in empathy and imitation, fire whether you're watching a lover's glance or a character's longing gaze. That's why you might catch yourself daydreaming about being the gardener next door, swaying in moonlight with fictional foliage. It's all part of the same dance. Your brain mapping emotional landscapes, even when your feet stay firmly on the ground. When you're that invested, critique takes a vacation. You overlook plot holes as easily as forgetting to buy milk. Oh, sure, the rose bushes are magically sentient, you think, but who cares? They're adorable. That cognitive suspension of disbelief is central to our storytelling love affair, and it's why you can binge watch an entire season in one night, even though you swore you'd only watch one episode. Yet, there's a delicate line. Too much swooning without narrative resolution can tip you into frustration, a relationship rebound you never wanted. If the story drags, the dopamine dips, and cortisol might sneak in. Your brain's way of groaning. Enough already. Functional storytelling is about pacing these romantic curves, building tension, allowing relief, inviting empathy, and sprinkling humor just so. It's choreography for your neurochemistry. Here's a practical bedtime test. Choose a short story, maybe about a daring night watchman who reads Shakespeare to stray cats. As you listen, note how your breathing changes. When the watchman whispers, "Wherefore art thou, Romeo?" you inhale, heart quickening, dopamine. When the cats purr around his feet, you feel warmth, oxytocin. And when he trips over a biscuit tin in a slapstick moment, you snort, endorphins. That gentle ebb and flow is your internal romance with the story, guiding you toward closure and ultimately to sleep. In real-life love, we seek connection, safety, shared laughter. In story love, we seek the same, but without the risk of awkward miscommunications or texting back too soon. We control the narrative pace. We can pause, rewind, or even decide to stop at the perfect moment, like I'm doing now, just before the gardener plants the climactic kiss scene. Your mind hovers, ready to drift, satisfied that love, real or fictional, has delivered its promise. So as you settle in deeper, let your mind recall the gardeners and their midnight trysts under moonlit petals. Feel that soft pull of suspense, the gentle glow of empathy, and the light spark of amusement. Fall in love with the story one final time tonight, knowing you're safe, cared for, and free to drift away. In the hush after a gentle story, there's a risk, the intruder of stress. You know the type. Heart thumping like a silent drum roll, mind buzzing with what-ifs, and shoulders creeping up toward your ears. That's cortisol and adrenaline crashing the party, whipping you into a fight-or-flight frenzy. And here, in the realm of bedtime storytelling, they're the uninvited guests who kill the mood faster than a dropped plot twist. Picture this. You're kneading dough for midnight pancakes, flour dust swirling like lazy snow, and your phone buzzes. It's an urgent email, just 3 words. Need answer now. Suddenly, your peaceful kitchen transforms into a pressure cooker. Your cortisol spikes, your breath shallows, and that cozy narrative comfort, poof, it vanishes with the aroma of burnt batter. Stress hormones are storytelling's kryptonite, where dopamine whispers, "Stay tuned," cortisol bellows, "Watch out." Your brain switches into alert mode, scanning for threats instead of savoring suspense. Remember our little cave dwellers from section 1. Their stories warned of saber-tooths, not calorie counts. Those tales were about real danger, processed through a measured rhythm. Today's emergencies, flooded inboxes, traffic jams, phantom notifications, are chronic cortisol triggers, eroding narrative calm like acid rain on sandstone. Academics still argue whether chronic stress rewires the brain more dramatically than a decade of nightly cliffhangers. Some say it shrinks areas that process emotion. Others argue it numbs empathy over time. Either way, when cortisol levels rise, your capacity to bond with characters wilts. Oxytocin recedes, dopamine falters, and endorphins become distant memories, like that glowing mushroom hallucination you joked about in section 3, but never actually tried. Please don't. Adrenaline joins the fray too, that jittery surge that turns calm voices into white-knuckle alerts. It's like trying to sip chamomile tea while someone clanks pots nearby. No matter how soothing the tea, your nerves refuse to settle. Adrenaline primes you for action, not relaxation. Your brain shortcuts through stories, scanning for immediate threats. Plot holes feel like real potholes, and gentle jokes land with the subtlety of a jackhammer. This devil's cocktail, cortisol and adrenaline, does more than steal tranquility. It rewires attention. Instead of soaking up nuanced imagery, like the crinkle of moonlight on a garden pond in section 2, you fixate on potential dangers. Did I lock the door? Do I have enough leave for tomorrow? That mental loop bulldozes narrative landscapes, leaving only bare facts, deadlines, to-do lists, midnight grocery runs. And here's a little practical bedtime test. Whisper a calm story into your pillow, then let a sudden alarm tone blare. Feel how instantly you jolt awake. That same principle can happen subtly when stress hormones creep in mid-narrative. You don't need a siren, a nagging thought. What if I forgot to reply to that text? Is enough to spike adrenaline and derail your drift. Yet we often underestimate how easily we slip into stress mode. A poorly worded Slack message, a neighbor's loud TV, the faint glow of your phone screen even when face down. Our modern habitats are wired for constant alert, not the soft ebb of bedtime tales. And the more wired we become, the less our brains remember how storytelling originally worked. Its unhurried pulse, its gentle back and forth between tension and release. So what can we do to banish the devil's cocktail from our bedtime ritual? First, ritual itself. You already know that routine scents calm the mind. Lavender sachets, a warm mug of decaffeinated something, maybe chamomile, maybe coconut water if you're feeling exotic. But why not ritualize story prep too? A brief stretch to dissolve muscle tension, a yawn, deliberate exhale included. A whispered, "Here we go," to cue the brain that danger is off duty. Next, set digital boundaries. Remember how we joked about midnight notifications? Try turning your phone to Do Not Disturb, or, better yet, leave it in another room. That single act tells your brain, no sudden ambushes here. With adrenaline off guard, you invite the angel's cocktail back to center stage. Third, weave in deliberate pauses. You've seen how a well-placed cliffhanger sparks dopamine, yes, but if you linger too long on suspense without a gentle resolution, cortisol can seep in. Balance tension with lull. After every gripping line, soften with a quiet image, like moonlight gliding across a pond, or the hush of snowfall on rooftops. Those melodic pauses are antidotes to stress, letting oxytocin and endorphins find their way home. Breathing is your secret weapon. A slow in and out pattern, 4 counts in, 6 counts out, tells your nervous system to pivot from fight mode to rest mode. Do it seamlessly between lines. Breathe in while I paint a scene. Breathe out as I sprinkle in a soft joke. Why did the storyteller bring a pillow to work? For fluff research. Yep, a groaner, but an endorphin hug nonetheless. Finally, embrace imperfect endings. Remember our nod to unresolved myths in section 2? The stories that trail off, leaving you with a gentle nudge toward your own imagination. Use similar endings nightly. Don't tie every narrative in a neat bow. Let the story's edges blur, signaling to your brain that it's time to switch from listening mode to dreaming mode. It's like the storyteller is handing you the mic. Your turn now. And that invitation feels safe, intimate, and stress-free. Stress will always try to gatecrash your slumber party. It's wired into our modern existence. But with awareness, and by repurposing ancient storytelling rhythms, you reclaim narrative calm. You tune out cortisol's clamor and dial into dopamine's lure, oxytocin's warmth, and endorphin's gentle laughter. You swap the devil's cocktail for the angel's brew, letting story magic infuse your last waking moments. As you nestle beneath your blankets, perhaps recalling the gardener's puddle pratfall or the turtle's moonlit trek, feel stress melt away. Let the devil's cocktail evaporate, leaving only the soft glow of storyic warmth. Remember when we talked about those cozy rituals that help us slip into storytelling ease? Well, here's a secret ingredient that's as old as campfires themselves: the rhythm of storytelling, the slow, steady pulse that cradles your mind like a lullaby. It's not just what's told, but how it's told that matters most for your sleepy brain. Stories, especially bedtime stories, have a natural cadence that mimics breathing, heartbeats, and even waves lapping on a shore. This rhythm creates a hypnotic flow that gently rocks you towards sleep. Think of it as the brain's favorite kind of music. No heavy bass drops or rapid-fire beats, just a soothing tempo that aligns with your nervous system's rest mode. Scientists still argue whether this rhythmic storytelling evolved as a survival tool or simply as a shared social comfort. Some believe our ancestors used it to synchronize group moods, like a collective calm before sleep, reducing nighttime anxiety. Others suggest it's a cognitive scaffold, helping the brain chunk complex ideas into manageable patterns. Either way, the rhythm is key. Picture a campfire storyteller drawing out a phrase, pausing just enough for the flicker of flames to fill the space. That pause is a gentle invitation to the listener's brain to digest, imagine, and relax. Too fast, and you risk jarring attention. Too slow, and you might lose interest altogether. The magic lies in that perfect, unhurried pace. This rhythmic pulse works on multiple levels. At the sensory level, it syncs with your breathing and heartbeat, nudging your body to unwind. Psychologically, it taps into pattern recognition, rewarding your brain with dopamine for catching the flow. And emotionally, it stirs oxytocin, the bonding hormone, creating a warm, safe feeling as you engage with the tale. Imagine a soft-spoken narrator describing a gentle rain tapping on leaves, each drop timed like a heartbeat. Your eyelids grow heavier not just because of the sleepy imagery, but because your body is syncing with that steady, reassuring rhythm. The storyteller isn't just conveying a scene, they're orchestrating a symphony of calm. And it's not just ancient tales that benefit from rhythm. Modern bedtime stories, podcasts, and ASMR creators harness this technique too. The slow, deliberate articulation, the careful pacing of words, the gentle rise and fall of tone, all mirror the natural rhythms that coax your brain into sleep. But beware the rogue rapid-fire narrator, the one who speeds through a story as if chasing a deadline. That break in rhythm can spike your stress hormones. Remember our devil's cocktail from section 5 and pull you out of that gentle trance. So, part of mastering bedtime storytelling is learning to breathe with the story, to let each sentence land and echo softly. Humor also plays a subtle role here. A well-timed, light joke acts like a little rhythmic reset, an oxytocin boost that breaks tension without jolting the system awake. Think of it as a brief wink in the middle of a soft melody, reminding your brain that all is well. Now, let's revisit a familiar friend, the humble pause. Far from empty space, a pause in storytelling is a powerful tool. It invites your brain to fill in the gaps with imagination, deepening engagement while easing cognitive load. This gentle engagement creates a feedback loop, releasing dopamine as you anticipate what comes next, even if it's just a slow unfolding of a peaceful scene. So next time you settle in for a story, notice the rhythm. Let the words flow like a slow stream, each one a pebble creating ripples of calm. Notice the pauses, the gentle inflections, and the soft humor tucked in. You're not just listening, you're syncing with a timeless dance that guides your brain from wakefulness to rest. And if your mind wanders, gently steer it back to the rhythm. Like a seasoned sailor adjusting sails, you're navigating toward that serene harbor where stories become lullabies and sleep is the final, sweetest destination. A well-placed cliffhanger is like the moon's reflection on still water. Just enough ripple to catch your eye, not enough to wake the fish. In the realm of bedtime storytelling, the dopamine cliffhanger trick is our secret lullaby. You know that slight catch in your throat when you hear, just then, the lantern flickered and a shadow crept closer. That's dopamine at work, whispering, keep listening, something's about to happen. It's like a gentle tap on the shoulder rather than a startled shout. Imagine you're floating on a calm sea of narrative, and I drop a tiny pebble, a suspenseful hint about tomorrow's adventure with the night watchman and his Shakespeare-reading cats. Your brain leans forward, your pupils dilate. Even in the softest voice, you're wired to anticipate what comes next. That burst of curiosity releases dopamine, sharpening focus and forging a little neurological path straight from your ears to your memory banks. But use cliffhangers sparingly, too many choppy endings. And then, but wait. Yet the door creaked, and your audience morphs into anxious night watchers, hearts racing, cortisol sneaking in like an uninvited guest. Functional storytelling invites suspense, then offers resolution, like a musical phrase that resolves on the tonic chord, letting tension melt away. Here's a practical bedtime test for your own stories. Narrate a simple scene, and at the moment of mild intrigue, say a distant howl or a flicker of movement behind a tree, pause for 3 heartbeats. Breathe in, breathe out, then continue. But as they turned, the moonlight revealed not a beast, but a family of owls. Their eyes gleamed like tiny lanterns, and all fear dissolved into wonder. That tiny suspense arc not only heightens engagement, it also primes your brain to relax once the reveal arrives. Dopamine spikes, then subsides, leaving you both attentive and peaceful. Academics still argue whether the optimal delay for a dopamine cliffhanger is 2 heartbeats or 10. It depends on individual pacing and the story's tone, but the principle remains: anticipation followed by gentle payoff. That ebb and flow mimics natural breathing, aligning with your body's innate rhythms for calm focus. In modern storytelling, podcasts, audiobooks, even sleep apps, this concept is employed scientifically. You may notice a soft click or a change in background sound right before a reveal, guiding your neurons much like a conductor leading an orchestra. Subtle shifts in tone, background rustle, or a barely audible heartbeat can heighten suspense without jarring you awake. That's the art of a bedtime cliffhanger. Enough to intrigue, never enough to alarm. Let's rewind to a simple story you might try tonight. Envision a tiny lantern, bobbing down a misty path as a shy child searches for a lost train ticket. You whisper. As the child rounded the bend, a faint whistle sounded. Did it come from the station, or something else entirely? Pause. Let that thought hover, then resolve. It was neither. A friendly night guard, whistling a lullaby, offering both comfort and the missing ticket. That moment of suspense triggers dopamine, then resolves with warmth, encouraging you to drift deeper under the covers. Notice how this structure mirrors good sleep hygiene. Brief stimulus, immediate comfort. A true cliffhanger for bedtime is more lull than jolt. It's also why classic fairy tales often end with a soft resolution. And they lived peacefully in the cottage by the woods. That final line is pure dopamine release, signaling that tension has been handled and it's now safe to rest. But beware the temptation to overuse the tactic. Endless dangling questions. Will the stranger knock? Will the rooftop creak? Turn your brain into a suspense junkie, anxious for the next hit. Instead, curate moments of intrigue, then lovingly unhook them. Let tension arise, then gently ebb. That's how you guide a listener from wakeful interest into the doorway of dreams. In practice, mix cliffhangers with humor. After a moment of suspense, the door handle turns slowly, squeaking. You might add a lighter side. Spoiler alert, it was only the cat trying to join the story again. That little joke floods your system with endorphins and oxytocin, balancing dopamine's charge. You remain curious but comforted and entirely ready for sleep. Functional storytellers often map their suspense arcs on paper, tiny peaks and valleys, much like composers sketch musical notation. You don't need a degree to do this. A simple list of beats, hint of danger, light-hearted pause, soft resolution is enough to keep your pace balanced. Scholars still debate whether a 7-point or 9-point arc is ideal for bedtime tales, but the takeaway is that structure matters. It orchestrates your brain chemistry. Now, let's consider the rhythm of suspense in real life. The anticipation before finding a hidden gift, the thrill of an unopened letter. Those moments are deeply human, and when harnessed in a bedtime story, they feel familiar, safe, and irresistibly engaging. It's like folding a tiny piece of everyday wonder into your nightly routine. So tonight, when you craft or choose your next sleepy tale, remember the dopamine cliffhanger trick. Tease just enough to keep your brain curious, then resolve softly. Balance suspense with warmth. And always pair it with a sprinkle of humor, a breath or two, and the promise that all will be well. That delicate push and pull is the storyteller's sweetest melody, one that leads straight into the land of Nod. Storytelling doesn't just tinker with dopamine, it also recruits oxytocin, the so-called cuddle hormone, to deepen our sense of connection and safety. Oxytocin's role in bedtime stories is subtle, but powerful. It's the warm, fuzzy feeling you get when a tale wraps you up like a cozy blanket, reminding you you're not alone in the dark. Think of it as the chemical equivalent of a soft hand on your shoulder, or the gentle thump of a parent's heartbeat beside you. Oxytocin release happens naturally during social bonding. A smile, a hug, or even the sound of a familiar voice. When you listen to a calming story, your brain interprets the voice as safe and caring, triggering this neurochemical cuddle. It's no coincidence that the tone of your storyteller matters. A soothing, rhythmic voice can coax oxytocin out from hiding, gently coaxing stress hormones to back off and making your nervous system settle like a cat curling up in a sunbeam. Remember the classic bedtime routine. The soft murmur, the careful enunciation, the slight rise and fall of the voice as it paints gentle images. All these elements invite oxytocin's embrace, enhancing feelings of trust and calm. Scientists still argue whether oxytocin's sleep-enhancing effects come primarily from social bonding, or if the hormone itself directly influences sleep architecture. But it's clear the connection is significant. The beauty of oxytocin in storytelling is its power to soften anxieties, like when you hear about a brave child navigating a shadowy forest, but surrounded by friendly creatures who watch over them. That blend of mild tension and emotional safety boosts your oxytocin levels, calming your heart rate and coaxing your mind toward rest. Modern sleep apps, podcasts, and audiobooks have caught on to this. Many use female narrators, who often naturally emit higher oxytocin-triggering vocal patterns, or they employ deliberate voice modulation to maximize relaxation. You may have noticed how your stress drops when you hear a warm, gentle tone, even over a screen or through headphones. That's oxytocin's invisible hand. Jokes and light-hearted moments in stories contribute here too. When you chuckle softly at a character's silly mistake, your brain releases oxytocin alongside endorphins, the natural feel-good chemicals. It's a cocktail that not only makes you smile, but also creates an emotional cushion, cushioning your stress and priming you for sleep. Imagine a story where a grumpy owl, tired of nighttime duties, tries to trade places with a firefly. The firefly, glowing bright but a bit clumsy, fumbles through the first patrol. The owl sighs but can't help chuckling. That interplay of frustration and humor draws you in, triggers oxytocin, and helps you feel part of the story's little community. You're not just a passive listener, you're a participant in this shared world. Try adding your own oxytocin moments to bedtime stories. Gentle reassurances, friendly animals, simple acts of kindness. Your voice becomes the vessel that carries these moments, and the neurochemistry follows. You're training your brain to associate storytelling with emotional safety, a kind of mental tuck-in. Oxytocin's influence also extends to memory consolidation. When stories evoke warm feelings, they're more likely to be remembered in a way that calms rather than excites. That's why bedtime stories don't usually stick with a jolt of adrenaline, but rather a soft glow of familiarity and comfort. Of course, the story's content must match the mood. An intense thriller or a chilling ghost tale might spike cortisol instead, our stress hormone, which makes falling asleep a challenge. So, while oxytocin fosters connection, cortisol screams, "Stay alert," and both battle for control of your night's narrative. In this dance between oxytocin and cortisol, your storytelling choices act like a dimmer switch for your nervous system. Soften the tone, add a little humor, and sprinkle in kindness. Your brain will follow, easing you closer to dreamland with every word. Think of oxytocin as the gentle hug your story gives your brain, reminding you that everything's okay, even if the night seems a little dark or the shadows a little long. With this neurochemical lullaby, storytelling transcends mere words. It becomes a balm, a nightly ritual that says, "You are safe, you are cared for, you can rest now." Laughter is often thought of as a spark in the dark, And in bedtime storytelling, it's the flicker that keeps things warm without waking you up. Just a soft chuckle, like the gentle hiss of a tea kettle. Enough to ease tension, but never enough to startle you awake. Endorphins, our brain's natural chill pill, flow quietly with every humorous aside, smoothing out rough edges of suspense and calming that subconscious critic. It's a secret power that bedtime narrators wield with playful intention. Imagine a tired sailor drifting off at the prow of a creaking ship. The storyteller leans in and whispers, and then, would you believe it? The first mate slipped on a banana peel left by a forgetful parrot. A tiny laugh bubbles up, and suddenly the storm clouds of tomorrow's worries part just enough to let a beam of ease shine through. That quick jolt of amusement triggers endorphins, loosening tight muscles and coaxing your nervous system toward a gentle sigh. Humor in a sleepy tale isn't about punchlines or grand setups. It's about tiny, unexpected details that feel like private jokes whispered in the quietest moment. A rogue garden gnome wobbling on one foot, or that glowing mushroom from Section 3 deciding it preferred disco over hallucinations. Yes, I know we agreed never to try that mushroom experiment. Consider it academic curiosity only. These little winks keep you engaged and relaxed, reminding your brain that storytelling is a safe playground. Scientists still argue whether humor's sleep-enhancing effects come from endorphins alone or a delightful cocktail with dopamine and oxytocin tagging along. But everyone agrees it's a powerful mood lifter. A well-timed joke can pivot a narrative from suspense to serenity, resetting stress hormones and flooding the brain with comfort chemicals. And because laughter is social, even in your bedroom, it deepens that sense of shared experience, like giggling with a friend under the covers. Think of two kinds of humor, the gentle absurdity and the warm self-deprecation. Gentle absurdity might sound like, the night guard discovered that the mice had learned to text each other, tiny squeaks of, "Where's the cheese?" echoing under the floorboards. Self-deprecation could be, if I tried that midnight fridge raid again, I'd probably trip over my own feet and wake every neighbor's dog within a 2-mile radius. Both styles invite a soft grin while keeping cortisol at bay. Cortisol, remember, the arch nemesis of our bedtime ritual from Section 5, would like a word, but we're politely ignoring it tonight. In practice, timing is everything. After a suspenseful cliffhanger in Section 7, let the tension release with a brief chuckle, like, spoiler, the ghost turned out to be a particularly dramatic raccoon. That single quip sends endorphins trickling through your system, settling any leftover anxiety. Then you can drift back to peaceful narrative currents without a jolt. Your own bedtime stories can be sprinkled with tiny comedic flourishes that feel organic. If you're describing an ancient library where scrolls whisper secrets, you might add, legend says one scroll once sneezed, dust flew everywhere, and the librarian had to chase it for 3 days. That vivid absurdity nudges your imagination while offering a little emotional cushion. It's functional storytelling at its coziest. Callbacks strengthen humor's effect. Remind listeners of that glow-in-the-dark mushroom we mentioned earlier. Thankfully, tonight's bedside tale is 100% mushroom-free, or at least disco-free, and you get a double dose of amusement from recognition and surprise. That gentle, self-aware wink enhances endorphin release, because your brain delights in patterns and playful twists. Even the storyteller's voice can be part of the joke. A subtle shift, like adopting an exaggerated whisper for a mock-serious aside, can send proprioceptive signals to your body that relax muscles around the jaw and shoulders. We often hold tension in our faces when listening intently, but a soft smile triggered by humor sends relaxation signals down the spine, priming you for drowsiness. Another playful tactic: anthropomorphize everyday objects. The moon yawned its way across the sky, stretching cratered arms before slipping behind a cloud's cozy blanket. That silly image tickles the brain's creativity center and lets you exhale. It's a creative endorphin hack. Whenever you imagine the moon with arms, your mind delights in the absurdity, and your body responds by loosening up. When weaving humor, consider cultural context. A local reference. In Istanbul, you might hear a seagull squawk between chapters as if it's heckling my narration, can spark a private giggle for anyone in Turkey, deepening that feeling of shared intimacy. It's like the storyteller and listener are in on a little neighborhood secret, suspended between reality and imagination. Of course, humor must be gentle. Avoid topics that might spark real anxiety or controversy. No sudden scares, no heavy irony. The goal is to softly nudge, never to alarm. You want your audience's mind to think, "Ah, that's delightful," not "Wait, was that insensitive?" When in doubt, err on the side of sweet absurdity. A dancing snail, a snoring dragon, a sock puppet uprising in the linen closet. As you drift deeper, let laughter be the breeze that stirs your leaves without ripping them from the branch. Tiny snorts, soft grins, and subdued chuckles are your co-pilots to rest. They scatter cortisol, invite endorphins, and remind your brain that this is a safe, comforting space. After all, even the most enchanting story benefits from a sprinkle of levity, like a dusting of stardust on a moonlit path. So tonight, as you recall the turtle's midnight beach crawl, or the gardener's compost puddle pratfall from Section 4, let a small smile break the stillness. That smile is your brain's way of saying, "Yes, I'm here. I'm relaxed. I'm ready." And with each gentle giggle, you carve a softer path into sleep's warm embrace. Now, as you settle deeper into this gentle narrative flow, let's consider the science of voice itself, the very tool that carries these stories to your ears and into your mind's eye. The magic of storytelling isn't just in what is said, but how it's said. The rhythm, tone, and cadence weave their own subtle spell, coaxing your nervous system into a slower, dreamier pace. It's a bit like the difference between a calm river and a rushing waterfall. Same water, vastly different effect. Have you ever noticed how your heartbeat often syncs up with a soothing voice? There's a reason for that. Slow, steady speech patterns encourage your parasympathetic nervous system, your rest and digest mode, to kick in. This biological switch calms your heart rate, lowers blood pressure, and signals your body that it's safe to relax. In essence, a gentle voice is a lullaby for your autonomic nervous system. This phenomenon is no accident. Storytellers throughout history have instinctively modulated their voices to engage listeners. Tribal elders around campfires, monks chanting in quiet monasteries, parents reading bedtime stories. All these voices tap into an ancient neural code that says, "Relax, you're okay." Scientists still debate exactly how much of this response is innate versus learned, but it's clear the brain responds powerfully to vocal cues. A storyteller's voice often mirrors the environment they want to create. Imagine a soft breeze whispering through the trees. That's the kind of voice that eases you here. Lower pitches, slower tempos, and gentle inflections mimic natural sounds that have comforted humans since prehistoric times. This is why ASMR voices feel so soothing, because they trigger the same pathways that quiet natural environments do. But there's an art to balance. Too slow, and the voice risks becoming monotone, lulling your brain toward boredom rather than sleep. Too fast, and it can spark alertness, like a sudden shout in a quiet room. The sweet spot lies in a natural rhythmic pattern, like the cadence of a calm conversation with a close friend who knows just when to pause, when to smile, and when to lean in a little closer. Pauses are particularly powerful. A well-timed pause gives your mind a moment to absorb, to visualize, and even to breathe a little deeper. It's a subtle invitation to settle in, like a soft exhale. Think back to that long pause after the parrot's banana peel slip in Section 9. Your brain got a moment to chuckle, then drift, and the storyteller's voice glided on like a feather riding the wind. The texture of voice matters too. A slight huskiness or breathiness can feel intimate, like a secret shared just for you. Contrast that with a clear, crisp tone, which can sound more formal or distant. The most effective bedtime storytelling voice blends these textures, keeping you both comforted and engaged, like a cozy blanket with a touch of silky softness. Modern technology even studies this effect. Sleep apps use voice modulation algorithms designed to mimic soothing human speech, and some sleep therapists employ voice hygiene techniques, training speakers to avoid vocal strain and maintain a consistent, calming tone. You might think, who knew bedtime stories were such a science? But it's just another reminder that storytelling is an ancient technology, perfected over millennia. Sometimes, the storyteller might play with subtle shifts in pitch or volume to signal narrative turns. A gentle rise can signal wonder, a softer drop can hint at mystery, and a near whisper can create intimacy. It's almost like musical notation for emotions, sending your brain a gentle score that keeps the story alive without ever demanding too much attention. And then there's the pace of language itself. Short sentences for clarity and ease, longer, flowing sentences to mimic natural breathing. This variation prevents the brain from slipping into boredom or frustration. It's like a lullaby with unexpected notes that keep you interested, but never so sharp that you jolt awake. In fact, the brain's auditory cortex processes these voice cues deeply, more so than most other sensory inputs when you're drifting towards sleep. It's as if your brain prioritizes the storyteller's voice, making it a kind of internal beacon, guiding you safely into dreamland. This is why a familiar voice can be so comforting, even if the story itself is new. So next time you find yourself telling a bedtime story, whether aloud or in your mind, pay attention to your voice. Slow it down just enough, add a touch of warmth, and let your pauses breathe. Your nervous system will thank you, and you'll find the path to sleep lined with a gentle soundtrack designed just for you. Remember the turtle's slow crawl from section 4, and imagine narrating it with a voice that mirrors that steady, peaceful pace. The moon yawning from section 9 might speak in a soft whisper, while the mischievous mouse texting her friends could have a cheeky little chuckle tucked inside. That's the alchemy of voice, turning words into an invitation to rest. And now, as the story continues, let your breath match the rhythm of this voice, slow and steady. Let the gentle rise and fall cradle you, guiding your thoughts into soft dreams where every word becomes a thread, weaving a comforting blanket around your mind. As your body relaxes further, let's take a quiet journey into the timeless power of imagery, the mental pictures that storytelling paints behind your closed eyes. You might think of imagery as just decorative fluff, but it's actually one of the core gears turning in the clockwork of sleep-friendly tales. The images your mind creates help soothe your nervous system by engaging your visual cortex in a peaceful, imaginative playground. The science behind imagery is fascinating. When you listen to a story and imagine the scenes, your brain activates many of the same regions it would if you were actually seeing those images. This mental rehearsal can be deeply calming if the images are gentle and positive. But the reverse is true too. Disturbing imagery can ramp up adrenaline and anxiety, so the storyteller's skill lies in carefully choosing images that invite relaxation, not alertness. Imagine a gentle stream flowing beneath a canopy of softly rustling leaves. You can almost hear the water's soft gurgle and feel the coolness of shade on your skin. This scene invites your brain to create a serene internal world, one that contrasts with the bright lights and noise of daily life. You're not just hearing the story, you're living it, in the quiet privacy of your mind. Scientists still debate how vivid these mental images need to be to trigger relaxation. Some find even a faint suggestion of a scene enough to calm their thoughts, while others benefit from more detailed visualization. That's why bedtime storytelling often balances suggestion with gentle detail, enough to engage the imagination without overwhelming it. A classic technique involves all 5 senses, even if the story mainly uses words to paint a picture. For example, describing a warm breeze might include not just the feel, but the scent of jasmine or the distant sound of crickets chirping. These sensory details build a richer, more immersive experience, helping your brain relax into a multi-layered world that feels safe and comforting. One thing to avoid, though, is overly complicated or fast-moving scenes. Your brain doesn't need a cinematic blockbuster before bedtime, more like a slow, beautifully illustrated picture book where each page invites a deep breath. That's why stories with cozy, repetitive settings often feel so soothing. The familiarity of a quiet forest or a starry desert sky creates a steady mental anchor. And humor plays its part here too. Remember that dancing snail from section 9? The absurdity creates a light-hearted image that invites a small smile, relaxing your facial muscles and easing tension. Imagery and humor team up to make the storytelling experience both vivid and restful. Another powerful imagery tool is the use of metaphor, comparing one thing to another to create emotional resonance. Saying, "The night wrapped its arms around the village," invites you to picture night as a gentle, protective presence. This kind of metaphor taps into universal feelings of safety and warmth, a perfect lullaby for the mind. Your personal experiences shape the power of imagery as well. A story about a warm hearth might be extra comforting if you grew up with a fireplace. For others, a story about the ocean's lull might do the trick. That's why personalized bedtime stories are so effective. They weave your memories and feelings into the narrative fabric. And, of course, imagery ties back to voice and pacing from section 10. A slow, steady voice describing a gentle rain tapping on leaves is far more calming than the same scene rushed through. The way images are introduced, spaced out, and layered gradually builds a cozy mental space for you to inhabit. Sometimes, the storyteller invites you to participate mentally. Imagine the soft glow of fireflies lighting your path. This active engagement turns passive listening into a mindful moment, a kind of meditation that deepens relaxation. It's a subtle cue for your brain to shift from stress mode to rest mode. Remember the glowing mushroom from earlier. Let it glow softly again in your mind's eye, casting a gentle light on a mossy forest floor. Now the moon yawns and the turtle crawls slowly toward a quiet beach, each image layering on the last, weaving a slow, hypnotic pattern of calm. As you visualize these scenes, your body responds. Heart rate slows, muscles soften, and breathing deepens. It's no accident that people use nature imagery in relaxation exercises and sleep therapies, because nature embodies the kind of unhurried, non-threatening environments that lull us toward rest. So, allow your imagination to drift gently, like a feather on a breeze, through these softly painted scenes. There's no rush, no destination, only the quiet joy of wandering through a peaceful inner world, where every detail invites ease and quietude. Stories don't just tickle our emotions, they spark heated debates in labs and lecture halls about why they captivate the human brain so profoundly. Scientists still argue whether storytelling's primal power comes mainly from language circuits evolving for social bonding or from ancient neural patterns designed for survival data sharing. Either way, the research reveals that narratives engage multiple brain networks simultaneously, making stories uniquely potent for shaping memory, emotion, and behavior. First, consider the default mode network, a collection of brain regions active when you're at rest or mind-wandering. When you listen to a story, your default mode network lights up, mirroring the actions and sensations described. If a character strolls along a moonlit path, your brain simulates that walk. Visual regions process the scenery, motor areas ignite the sensation of footsteps, and emotional centers tag the memory with feeling. This multisensory replay primes your mind to absorb narrative content far more richly than raw facts ever could. Then, there's the theory of mind network, which helps you infer others' beliefs and intentions. Stories laden with characters and motives engage this network, training your brain to navigate complex social dynamics. When you empathize with a tentative night guard from section 3 or giggle at the compost puddle pratfall in section 4, you're exercising these mental muscles. Over time, repeated narrative exposure can sharpen social cognition, making listeners more attuned to emotions in real life. A third critical player is the salience network, which detects novel or important stimuli. A sudden plot twist, a whispered whisper of a shadow in section 7, activates this network, signaling your brain, pay attention, something matters here. That spike in alertness is accompanied by a dopamine surge, reinforcing memory consolidation. Unlike advertisements that pummel you with random images, a well-crafted story leverages salience cues within a coherent framework, so your brain tags memorable events in context, These overlapping networks explain why stories pack such a punch. Facts in isolation, dates, statistics, bullet points, primarily engage the executive network, responsible for logical reasoning. They lack the emotional and social hooks that recruit the default mode and theory of mind networks, making them easier to forget. A bedtime lesson on the phases of the moon can be absorbed in less than a minute, but rarely sticks the way a short fable about moon spirits dancing atop clouds does. The fable enlists all three networks. The lecture uses only one. Yet academic debates continue about the precise mechanisms. Some researchers argue that narrative transportation, the feeling of being lost in a story, is the linchpin, offering a gateway for emotional immersion and cognitive engagement. Others claim that aesthetic emotions, such as awe or amusement, hold sway, suggesting the brain's reward systems evolved to prioritize experiences that stimulate creativity and social learning. Still others focus on memory schemas, mental templates for organizing information. Arguing stories work by fitting new data into familiar narrative frames, which then become easier to retrieve. Practical experiments back up these theories. In one study, participants who read a brief moral tale about honesty were more likely to report ethical decision-making hours later than those who read a list of moral principles. Neuroimaging showed higher activation in areas linked to emotional processing among the storytelling group, corroborating the idea that emotionally charged narratives leave deeper neural footprints. Another trial found that children exposed to historical events through storytelling recalled 3 times more detail after a week than peers who studied timelines and bullet point notes. Even the order of narrative elements matters. The classical 3-act structure, setup, confrontation, resolution, aligns with peaks and valleys in our brain's dopamine curve. A strong setup builds safety, the confrontation spikes curiosity, and the resolution releases tension, inviting rest. Deviating from this arc can impair engagement. Too much early tension without context can trigger stress networks, while a bland setup fails to engage salient centers. But storytelling's neuroscience isn't solely about academic curiosity. It has real-world applications. In healthcare, narrative medicine uses patient stories to foster empathy in medical professionals, reducing burnout by reconnecting them with the human side of treatment. In education, story-based curricula boost literacy and comprehension, making lessons stick by weaving them into engaging contexts. Marketers harness brand storytelling to deepen consumer loyalty, understanding that a brand narrative triggers the same bonding hormones we experience when a bedtime tale warms our hearts. For bedtime storytellers like you, these insights offer a roadmap. You're not just sharing yarns, you're skillfully orchestrating neural symphonies. When you introduce a character's motive, you engage theory of mind. When you paint soothing imagery, you spark the default mode network. When you build gentle suspense, you recruit the salience network alongside a trace of dopamine. And when you resolve the narrative softly, you invite the brain's reward mechanisms to tuck away those moments in long-term memory. Remember the turtle's slow trek from section 4, the gardener's puddle pratfall from section 7, and the owl and firefly exchange in section 8. Each was more than a whimsical vignette. It was a neurobiological handshake across time. Your brain responded to each scene with precise chemical choreography: dopamine, oxytocin, endorphins dancing in concert, while cortisol and adrenaline took a back seat. By understanding these neural underpinnings, you become a more effective storyteller, and if you're listening in bed, a better sleeper. You harness evolutionary honed circuits to guide your listener gently from wakefulness into rest, using ancient brain networks that crave coherent, emotionally resonant narratives. So tonight, as you nestle under blankets, know that each word you hear is backed by millennia of neural optimization. Your brain isn't passively logging data, it's actively engaged, orchestrating a symphony of networks in response to story's magic. That's why a tale told well can outshine bullet points, and why sleep comes easiest when our minds drift through narratives as old as humankind itself. Stories seep into every crack of our daily lives, shaping what we buy, how we feel, and even which wristwatch we choose. Remember that significant object experiment from Section 2, where a 99-cent horse's head fetched $62 after a story was added. That wasn't a one-off, and it mirrors how brands tell tiny tales to nudge us toward purchases. In modern parlance, this is product placement, subtly woven into movies, shows, and ads to spark dopamine-fueled desire. Scientists still argue whether product narratives hijack our free will or simply satisfy our ancient craving for meaning, but the result is clear. We assign value to stories as much as to objects. Consider the last time you checked your phone for a social media story. A brief sequence of images with a casual caption, yet somehow it feels like an intimate peek into someone's life. That mini narrative hooks oxytocin, drawing you into a sense of connection with people you may never meet. Brands mimic this by posting behind-the-scenes snippets, birthday shout-outs, or day-in-the-life reels, all to cultivate trust and warmth. It's the same cuddle hormone trick we saw in Section 8, only now it convinces us to follow, like, and eventually buy. Even watches are sold through story crafting. You see an elegant commercial. A suited adventurer beneath northern lights checks his timepiece, the reflection glowing like a meteor. You're not just buying steel and gears. You're buying the illusion of epic nights and silent snowfields. That $10,000 Omega on James Bond's wrist isn't about precision. It's a narrative beacon calling, "Be this hero." Endorphins from a light joke. Just don't try climbing any glaciers on foot, please. Soften the pitch into something that feels cozy rather than brash. Every dinner table conversation, too, is a form of storytelling. When you recount your commute meltdown, then the bus driver did a U-turn on the roundabout as if auditioning for a stunt show. You trigger laughter and shared empathy. That communal humor releases endorphins and oxytocin, knitting friends closer while turning mundane misadventures into legendary anecdotes. You're both the hero and the historian of your own life, transforming raw experience into emotional cargo that others happily receive. Advertising agencies have caught on, building entire campaigns around micro-stories. A cereal box with a cartoon hero saving breakfast from boredom sparks a mild dopamine spike every morning. A news app that teases breaking stories in real time taps into the salience network we explored in Section 12, making each headline feel urgent and important. Even traffic alerts can become narratives. Major jam on the E5. Consider the scenic coastal route feels like a mini quest rather than a mere inconvenience. In workplaces, meetings often open with storytime segments. A CEO might recount how a chance remark at a coffee shop led to $1 million idea, eliciting trust and alignment before dry metrics appear. That's oxytocin priming followed by dopamine intrigue. Your brain is cued. Pay attention, this matters. And when numbers finally flash, you're already emotionally invested. Our personal digital assistants, too, leverage narrative. A weather app might say, "Good evening, it looks like rain, grab a book, a mug of tea, and get cozy." It's a micro-story that frames your night, sprinkling oxytocin and endorphins to make even rain feel inviting. You're not just checking the forecast, you're accepting an invitation to a cozy narrative. Yet, there's a flip side. When every interaction is a story, our brains can grow weary. Continuous narrative nudges, endless cliffhangers in show previews, perpetual social media updates can spike cortisol if unresolved or too urgent. Remember Section 5's warning about stress hormones hijacking calm. When ads refuse to resolve their mini-plots, leaving you perpetually stay tuned, your brain's alarm bells ring. That's why functional storytelling in everyday life must balance intrigue with resolution. A social media post that ends with a question, "Guess where I'm headed next?" sparks curiosity, but it needs a follow-up answer to avoid anxiety. A product teaser should eventually reveal the full offer, allowing dopamine to subside and oxytocin to build trust, rather than fueling endless anticipation. Ultimately, we are all storytellers and the subjects of others' stories simultaneously. Every message we send, every photo we share, rewrites an ongoing narrative about who we are and what we value. Brands, friends, and even weather apps tap into the same neurochemical pathways: dopamine for curiosity, oxytocin for connection, endorphins for comfort, to guide our emotions and decisions. Tonight, as you reflect on the turtle's trek, the gardener's puddle pratfall, or the glowing firefly from Section 8, remember that those tales are echoes of the countless stories swirling around you every day. Each headline, each ad, each whispered memory is part of the grand tapestry of narrative that shapes your world. And knowing this gives you the power to choose which stories you let in, and which you invite to guide your dreams. Stories can be wondrous guides, but they can also steer us off course when wielded with less than virtuous intent. Welcome to the darker alleyways of narrative, where manipulation, misinformation, and urban legends lurk. It's a realm where the same neurochemical levers, dopamine's curiosity, oxytocin's trust, endorphins' comfort, are pulled to serve agendas, not bedtime calm. And yes, academics still argue whether savvy storytelling is inherently ethical or simply evolution's neutral tool, but the effects are too powerful to ignore. Take the modern myth machine of social media urban legends, those spooky tales that promise chills, but often spread without verification. A whispered rumor about a haunted villa in a nearby town triggers dopamine-driven intrigue. What's this eerie tale? Tell me more. Before you know it, you've shared the post, amping oxytocin-fueled solidarity with fellow thrill-seekers, and perhaps even chuckled at an absurd punchline someone tacked on, an endorphin-laced afterthought, all without any factual grounding. The result? A viral myth that outlasts the truth, lingering in comment threads like a phantom. Then there's the advertising edge, where fear-based marketing exploits cortisol and adrenaline rather than the angel's cocktail. Health scare headlines. This common kitchen habit increases cancer risk. Jolt your brain into high alert. Adrenaline spikes your attention. Cortisol cements the fear, and suddenly you're scrolling through product offers for that miracle detox tea at 2 in the morning. That's the devil's cocktail dancing in advertising's web, preying on your stress to drive sales instead of offering genuine solutions. Political propaganda uses similar tactics, weaving partial truths into compelling narratives. A repeated anecdote. Remember when X saved the factory jobs? Cues oxytocin among those who lived through the era, creating an emotional bond with the storyteller. Dopamine hooks you with suspenseful framing. Will the promised jobs really return? While endorphins sneak in through light humor or patriotic slogans, softening critical analysis. Before you know it, a catchy slogan lodges in your mind, guiding beliefs long after the facts fade. Myths can also arise from well-meaning but misguided storytellers. Family lore, Grandpa fought off a bear with his bare hands, often grows with each retelling, adding dramatic flares that spike dopamine. Oxytocin keeps the storyteller and audience bonded, reinforcing shared identity. Even endorphins play their part when listeners laugh at the tale's more unbelievable turns. Over time, the factual core erodes, leaving a sensational yarn that feels more meaningful than mundane reality. In each case, narrative mechanics remain the same as in your gentlest bedtime tale: suspense, empathy, and relief. The difference lies in intent and context. Functional storytelling, for rest, learning, or genuine connection, balances intrigue with clarity. Manipulative storytelling for clicks or control tips, the balance favoring unresolved tension or fear cues that keep cortisol high. Spotting these tricks is your first line of defense. Notice when a story relies on fear rather than gentle suspense. Watch for abrupt cliffhangers followed by "buy now" and prompts instead of a soft resolution. Pay attention to how humor is used. Does it serve relief and bonding, or does it mask deeper anxieties? Ask yourself, does this tale end with clarity and calm, or does it leave me unsettled? Another tactic is to diversify the stories you consume. Counterbalance sensational myths with verified, gently told histories or science-based narratives that reward curiosity without stoking alarm. Seek storytellers who explicitly resolve tension and invite reflection, rather than those who promise stay tuned for more, to prolong suspense indefinitely. Finally, be mindful of your own storytelling. When you share anecdotes, aim to foster understanding and comfort. Use humor to connect, not to distract. Offer context to avoid misinterpretation. And always strive for narrative resolutions that leave listeners informed and at peace, rather than on edge. In a world awash with competing narratives, the power of stories is both a gift and a responsibility. By recognizing manipulation's hallmarks, you reclaim agency over your own neurochemical responses, choosing when to welcome the angel's cocktail and when to close the door on the devil's brew. That discerning choice is the hallmark of a wise storyteller and a well-rested mind. It's time for our narrative to glide gently toward its final shore, the moment when story becomes lullaby and you drift into sleep's embrace. Closing a tale softly isn't just an aesthetic choice. It's a neurochemical signal that tells your brain all plot threads are tidied. It's safe to rest. When done well, it deploys a final wave of dopamine resolution, a comforting squirt of oxytocin, and a lullaby of endorphins, guiding every part of your nervous system toward calm. Imagine the last lines of a bedtime story. The night watchman, remember him from sections 3 and 7? Closes his book of Shakespeare, smiles at his feline companions, and tiptoes home beneath a starlit sky. His lantern's glow dims as he slips inside, the door clicking softly behind him. In that moment, your brain hears a closing chord, much like an orchestra's gentle finale. Dopamine rewards you for staying the course. Oxytocin whispers that connection endures beyond the spoken word. Endorphins sprinkle a final touch of contentment. Scholars still argue whether the ideal narrative conclusion should mirror the circular structure of ancient myths or favor an open-ended coda that invites dream weaving. But both methods share a single goal: reduce cognitive load and cue the parasympathetic nervous system. A neatly tied bow satisfies our craving for closure, and they lived peacefully beyond moonlight, while a dreamy, unresolved image encourages imagination to wander. And somewhere, beyond the fjords, you might hear the sea's soft song. Notice how a soft ending differs from an abrupt cutoff. An abrupt ending, a story that stops mid-sentence or jumps suddenly to another topic, triggers a mild cortisol spike, akin to a door slamming in a quiet house. Your brain jolts, scanning for missing pieces rather than settling. A seamless conclusion, however, slides you out of the narrative like a slow elevator descent, pausing at each floor, memory, emotion, relaxation, until you step off into unconsciousness. Callbacks play a pivotal role here. Recall the turtle's moonlit trek from section 3, the gardener's mettle from section 4, the dancing snail debut in section 9. As you remember each vignette, your brain revisits its emotional terrain, but without fresh suspense. Instead, there's a warm familiarity, a sense of, we've shared this journey. That repeated resonance deepens oxytocin's lull, creating trust that carries you across the threshold of sleep. Humor too can soften the landing, just a light sprinkle. Perhaps the turtle yawns so widely that its shell nearly tips, a slow-motion banana peel moment echoing section 7. Or the night watchman's cat flicks the lantern off with a mischievous paw. These gentle chuckles aren't designed to keep you awake. They're the final endorphin caress, assuring your brain that even as the story ends, joy remains. Voice and pacing converge in the finale. A storyteller may lower tone and slow pace by an extra 10–15%, stretching vowels just enough for your body to match that deceleration. Pauses grow slightly longer, 2 heartbeats instead of 1, allowing your nervous system to follow the narrative's gentle decrescendo. It's an artful dance between narrative structure and embodied relaxation. The imagery in a closing scene often returns to elemental calm. Moonlight backs off to twilight, embers flicker out, waves retreat to silent sands. You might envision the glow-in-the-dark mushroom from section 3 folding its bioluminescent arms, or the astronomer in section 6 lowering her telescope after one last star sighting. That soft receding of light and motion soothes both visual cortex and limbic system, signaling that activity is complete. Experts still debate whether bedtime stories should include a brief moral or simply fade out, but many agree that ethical reflections, and so kindness will always guide our steps, can offer a final oxytocin nudge. Yet, overly didactic closings risk re-engaging the executive network, prompting self-analysis rather than relaxation. The trick is to be suggestive, not instructive, a gentle moral like a whispered secret. To practice this yourself, map your story's denouement arc, a three-step descent, suspense resolution, emotional callback, sensory fade-out. For example, resolve any remaining questions. Yes, the night watchman found his missing glove. Recall a warm moment from earlier, and the turtles hummed back to their nests. Then close with sensory calm. A cool breeze sighed through the willows as fireflies blinked one last goodnight. That threefold structure delivers a final dopamine reward, followed by oxytocin reassurance and endorphin ease. As you hear these words, feel your body sinking with the narrative's final breaths. Your breath slows, muscles soften, and your mind drifts over the gentle waves of story. Each callback, snail, mushroom, night watchman, anchors you to familiar comfort. Each pause invites a deeper exhale. Each soft sound invites quiet. Soon, even this last sentence will dissolve in your mind, replaced by the gentle hum of sleep. Before you know it, you'll be dreaming of lantern-lit forests, snail parades, and moonlit beaches. And that is exactly where I intend you to be. Now, dear listener, our tale slips into whisper. There's no rush, no final purpose to serve, only the quiet promise of rest. Imagine the forest's hush after the storyteller departs, leaves stirring softly in a soft breeze. Your thoughts untangle like silk threads, drifting on invisible currents. Breathe in one slow count and breathe out two. Feel each exhale carry you farther from daytime demands. In this stillness, every heartbeat is gentle, every muscle a sigh. The dancer snail from earlier waves a friendly, sleepy goodbye, and the glowing mushroom dims to a soft, reassuring glow. You are safe here, nestled between memory and dream. The night watchman's lantern has flickered out, but its warmth remains in your chest. Your mind, once busy with tasks and worries, now finds calm in empty spaces. The soft pause between stars, the gentle stretch of moonlight across quiet water. Allow the final echo of my voice to fade, like footsteps receding along a forest path. Each flicker of memory, a turtle's midnight trek, a gardener's compost mishap, a parrot's banana peel, becomes part of your own inner story, woven into the tapestry of dreams. Sleep is not an end, but a gentle continuation of our narrative. Let your mind paint the rest of the scenes, free from suspense and stress. You need only surrender to the warmth of imagination, trusting the path laid by every word you've heard. Good night, and may your sleep be as soft as this final whisper.